The pale woolen cloth entering this doorway is not clean. By the time it leaves, it may look almost new again. But between those two moments lies a process that feels startlingly unfamiliar from a modern laundry. There is no turning drum behind the wall, no bottle of detergent, no electric heat. There are stone basins, water, clay, patient hands, bare feet, and one cleansing material for which Roman fullers would become famous: urine. It is late afternoon in Pompeii. The light over Via dell'Abbondanza has begun to soften, and the rooms behind this doorway are still busy. Tonight we are not following an emperor, a gladiator, or a general. We are following one piece of cloth. We will stay close to it as it moves through a working Fullonica, from the street to the basin, through rinsing and finishing, and finally toward the quiet upper terrace where fabric can dry above the city. The object is ordinary. That is exactly why it can tell us so much. The building around us did not begin as a laundry. Its bones belong to a house. An atrium once organized the rooms around an impluvium, the shallow basin that received rainwater from the opening in the roof. In the final decades of Pompeii, that domestic arrangement was altered for work. The central basin became part of a textile processing system. More basins occupied the rear garden, and the upper level could be used for drying cloth. That transformation matters, because it makes the Fullonica feel less like a separate factory and more like a piece of city life inserted into familiar architecture. Painted walls and domestic rooms did not simply disappear when commerce arrived. Functions changed. Surfaces were reused. A place designed for receiving guests and family routines could become a place where wet wool, water, traffic, and labor pass through every day. Our cloth crosses the threshold into that hybrid space now, leaving the street behind without entering anything that would resemble a modern industrial building. Before the cloth is plunged into anything, someone has to look at it. Wool can carry dust, skin oils, smoke, food stains, and the grime of a crowded street. A newly produced textile may also need degreasing and finishing before it looks and feels ready to wear. Roman fullers dealt with both worn garments and cloth that had not yet entered ordinary use, so the exact treatment was not necessarily identical every time. For our journey, imagine a worker spreading the pale material over a low surface near the central basin. The cloth is heavy enough to fold rather than flutter. Fingers find the darker places. The edges checked for damage. Nothing in this moment is spectacular. Yet it is the first useful decision of the process. What does this particular piece need? The Fullonica was not a machine that performed one automatic cycle. It was a workshop. Human judgment remained inside every stage, even when the repeated labor itself became exhausting. Now that the cloth meets water, the stone edge is worn by use, and the material darkens almost immediately as it becomes saturated. Dry wool has a certain stiffness and volume. Wet wool behaves differently. It gains weight. It folds in on itself. It becomes something that must be lifted, pushed, turned, and worked. The central basin of Stephanus's Fullonica is one of the clearest signs of the building's conversion from house to workplace. Here, architecture becomes part of the process. Water does not arrive through a hose. There's no stainless steel drum waiting to spin. The worker has stone, liquid, space, and muscle. The atmosphere is tactile. Wet plaster nearby, rough masonry under the hand, the smell of damp wool, the small sounds of water moving against a basin wall. By narrowing our attention to one wet piece of cloth, the scale of Roman urban life becomes suddenly physical. Beside the water is the detail modern visitors remember most. Fullers used urine as one of their cleansing agents. The fact is easy to turn into a joke, but the practical reason is more interesting. As urine stands, chemical changes can make the liquid increasingly alkaline. In a world without modern formulated detergents, alkaline materials helped loosen greasy dirt from wool. This does not mean every garment in every Fullonica was treated in exactly the same mixture. And it does not mean Roman workers thought dirt itself was desirable. They were using available chemistry without describing it in modern terms. Other materials could also be used in textile cleaning and finishing. But urine was useful enough to become closely associated with the trade. The cloth in our basin is not being dipped into some theatrical vat of filth. It is entering a controlled working mixture whose purpose is practical. The surprising ingredient is memorable. The less obvious story is that the fuller's workshop was built around repeated empirical knowledge. What lifted grease, what damaged color, what restored a surface, and what did not. Then the most demanding part begins. The worker steps into the basin. Ancient descriptions and Pompeian imagery show fullers treading cloth with their feet. The movement could be repetitive enough to attract its own comparisons. Lifting, pressing, shifting, stamping, turning. From a distance, it can almost look rhythmic. From inside the basin, it is labor. The worker braces against the edge. One foot presses into a fold of wet wool, then the other. The cloth slides under the sole and has to be gathered back. Water moves around the ankles. The weight of the body becomes a tool. What a modern machine would achieve through mechanical agitation is produced here through balance, repetition, and time. This is an important visual change in our episode. Until now, the cloth has mostly been carried or inspected. Here, it becomes active material. It twists. It compresses. It releases trapped water. The worker's posture adjusts constantly. The Fullonica does not merely contain a cleaning process. It records that process in tired legs, wet skin, worn stone, and countless repeated motions. When the first working stage is finished, the cloth has to be freed from what has been loosened. Clean water becomes important again. The Fullonica of Stephanus had multiple basins, and the restored archaeological picture emphasizes rinsing as part of the layout. The textile is lifted. Water streams from its lower edge. Another pair of hands can help because wet wool is awkward and heavy. The material is turned through fresher water and worked again, this time with a different purpose. What was dissolved or suspended must be carried away. Then comes wringing. Not the violent twisting that would destroy a valuable textile, but controlled pressure, folding, squeezing, and handling. The worker watches what the water does. He watches the color of the cloth. He feels how it responds. The noise of the street has faded slightly by now. The workshop remains active, but the sunlight reaching the interior is weaker. The process itself gives us our clock, wet work below, drying spaces above, and a city slowly moving toward evening. The cloth travels deeper into the building, toward the spaces where more basins were installed in the rear garden. This is where the converted house becomes easiest to understand as a system. The street entrance receives people and goods. The atrium provides a central working zone. The back of the property holds additional wet processing capacity. Above, open air offers a place to dry. A Fullonica is therefore not one vat. It is a sequence of spaces. Each movement of the cloth changes what part of the building matters. At the rear, the light is different. The open area gives softer illumination. Water surfaces reflect a pale sky. Walls that once framed domestic leisure now frame commercial work. A basket waits near the edge. A vessel rests against masonry. The cloth is shifted again, and for a moment, the episode can breathe. We have moved away from the shock of the urine and the exertion of treading. What remains is something quieter, a carefully organized workflow hidden inside an altered house. Another fuller's material seems almost too simple to deserve attention: earth. Ancient sources describe special clays or fuller's earth used in textile treatment. Such mineral material could help absorb greasy matter and assist scouring. We should not imagine one standardized branded powder. Different regions supplied different earths, and the precise choices could vary. The important idea is that Roman textile workers understood that certain soils behaved usefully when rubbed or worked into cloth. Our pale textile is laid where it can be handled again. A small quantity of fine material is applied. The visual contrast is strong. Soft wool against dry mineral powder, wet work giving way to a more controlled surface treatment. Fingers spread it. A hand presses it into an area that still needs attention. This is the kind of historical detail that changes how a workshop feels. The Fullonica is not primitive because it lacks modern chemistry. It has its own chemistry, observed through results, repeated through practice, and stored in craft knowledge rather than printed instructions. Cleaning is only part of what a fuller can do. Wool has a surface, and that surface can be changed. After drying enough for further work, cloth could be brushed or carded to raise the nap. Ancient reconstructions mention tools made from prickly natural materials, as well as brushing devices. The aim was not simply to remove visible dirt. It was to restore or improve the texture of the textile. The worker stretches a section where the light can catch it. A brush moves repeatedly in one direction. The wool begins to look less flattened. Fibers stand differently. A garment that had appeared tired can regain some of its visual softness. The shot should feel intimate here. Not a portrait of a worker, but a close view of hands, fibers, a tool, and the slow change in texture. The sound imagined by the narration is dry and repetitive, rather than dramatic. By now, the Fullonica has become less strange. Its methods are unfamiliar, but the underlying goal is recognizable. Make an expensive material clean, presentable, and worth using again. For pale cloth, fullers also had methods intended to improve whiteness. Literary and visual evidence associates sulfur with this work. Cloth could be arranged over a frame or basket-like structure while sulfur burned below, exposing the textile to fumes. Fine pale earths could also contribute to the finished appearance. This is not a step we should turn into a fantasy laboratory. There are no glass flasks or colored vapors. The materials are plain: cloth, a support, a small controlled source below, and workers who understand that the treatment must not simply destroy what they are trying to improve. The light outside is now close to dusk. Inside, the warm, practical glow becomes more important. Pale fabric catches what little illumination remains. The fuller checks rather than poses. One hand lifts an edge, another steadies the support. Not every textile would need exactly this treatment. Our cloth is pale, so this stage lets us see one of the techniques associated with whitening. The workshop's knowledge is selective. Treatment follows material, color, and desired finish. The final appearance of cloth also depends on shape. A textile that has been washed, worked, dried, and brushed can still look uneven. Pompeian evidence includes a press associated with fulling, using upright screws to compress and smooth fabric. This is the mechanical climax of our journey, but it is a quiet machine. No wheel spins quickly. No engine drives it. The force comes from turning and tightening. The cloth is folded carefully before it goes beneath the pressing surface. A worker checks the edges so the material does not bunch incorrectly. The screws descend by degrees. Wood creaks. Pressure increases. What hours of wet and surface work have loosened and lifted is now brought back under controlled compression. For the visual sequence, this is a useful change of geometry. Vertical screws, horizontal folded cloth, hands at different levels, and a strong frame within the frame. The Fullonica has moved from chemistry and body weight to leverage. Roman craft repeatedly does this, combining human judgment with very simple machines to achieve consistent results. It is easy to treat the cloth as a prop because we can replace clothing cheaply today. In Pompeii, a woolen garment represented material, spinning, weaving, finishing, and labor. Cleaning it well mattered. That value explains why a trade like fulling could occupy a visible place in the urban economy. It also explains the care hidden beneath the messier parts of the process. A ruined garment is not a harmless mistake. A badly handled textile wastes work already invested by other people. Our piece of pale wool is checked again after pressing. The surface is smoother. The folds are more disciplined. The smell and moisture of the wet stages are behind it. It has crossed almost the entire building. Around it, other work continues. Another garment may be in water. Another may be drying. The Fullonica is not built around our single object, of course. We have simply chosen one thread through the larger system, because following one object makes the organization visible. Every room contains different stages at the same time. Now we move upward. The Fullonica of Stephanus was altered, so the upper part could serve as a drying terrace. The choice is obvious once we stand there in imagination. Below are enclosed rooms, wet basins, heavy cloth, and concentrated labor. Above is moving air. The textile is carried up while the last color drains from the sky. From here, Pompeii opens around the workshop rather than disappearing behind its walls. Roof lines overlap. Street noise rises in softened fragments. Smoke hangs lightly in the distance. Cloth can be spread or hung where air reaches it. This wide view is one of the episode's major spatial resets. For most of our journey, the camera has stayed close to hands, feet, stone, and wool. The terrace suddenly reveals that this strange process belongs to an ordinary city. Other roofs hold other work. Other households are preparing for evening. The laundry is not a curiosity outside Roman life. It is part of the infrastructure that allows ordinary Roman appearances to be maintained. Dusk becomes night without an eruption, without panic, and without any need to turn Pompeii into a ruin before its time. That choice matters. The city is historically famous for the way it died, but people who lived here experienced it first as a place where things had to be washed, repaired, bought, cooked, carried, dried, and paid for. A fuller's workshop belongs to that living city. Below the terrace, the basins are darker now. Reflections that were silver in late afternoon become almost black. A lamp or small practical flame makes only a limited pool of light. The workday is narrowing. Wet surfaces cool. Tools are placed where they can be found again. Our cloth no longer needs dramatic attention. It simply needs time and air. The pace of the episode slows with it. We can leave the harder labor behind and listen instead to a city settling. Distant movement, muted voices, water, and fabric shifting slightly in the evening air. By the end of our journey, the pale cloth looks simple again. That simplicity is deceptive. It has passed through a building that used to be a house. It has met stone basins, water, alkaline cleaning material, repeated foot pressure, rinsing, mineral treatment, surface finishing, and controlled pressing. It has moved from the street into the center of the workshop, through the rear working spaces, and finally into open air. Not every Roman garment followed every one of these stages in exactly the same way, but together, the surviving Fullonica, ancient descriptions, and images from Pompeii let us reconstruct a craft that was far more organized than the famous joke about urine suggests. The rooms below are quiet now. Water rests in the basins. The pressing screws no longer move. On the upper level, pale cloth catches the faintest remaining light. Tomorrow it can return to the street looking ordinary. And that may be the most revealing thing about the Fullonica. An extraordinary amount of knowledge and labor could disappear into the appearance of something clean,